Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk. And with me, I'm fortunate to have our Elementary Principal of the Year, Dr. Bridget Belcastro, who is the principal at Johnsburg Elementary School. Bridget, thanks for taking a few minutes out here in an afternoon to spend a little time with me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So, Bridget, just kind of get started here. One of the things is I'm talking with the principals of the year that I think it's always fun to spend a little time reflecting on is just, what's your leadership story? What got you into the position, well, into school leadership overall, and maybe to, the path that got you to the position you're in now.
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I had great educational experiences growing up. And when I was in college, going to some of my observation hours, one of the people with me looked at me and said, "Well, you're going to be a principal." And I looked right at her and I was mortified. And I said, "Absolutely not. That is definitely not happening." And then 12 years later, I was in my doctoral program at Loyola for curriculum and instruction. And I just felt like I was at a different place. And I said, no, I that's what I need to do. Like I could not have an impact in the ways that I wanted. So I added on those classes to become an administrator. And here I am. And
Wow.
and and I wish I knew who that was. I
Mm-hmm.
want to say like, hey, look, here I am. You were right. And what did you
Interesting
see?
about though how like somebody puts a little bug in your ear just as an offhanded, maybe what even feels like an offhanded comment or something like that, and how that can plant a seed and then off and running.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, actually.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. So how long have you been now at Johnsburg Elementary?
So this is my ninth year.
Really? Now
Yeah,
that's man, it's amazing how time has flown by then as far as that goes. So
absolutely.
talk
And I love it.
so talk to us about your school. What you got going on there?
We have a lot going on here. One of the things actually that I will mention is that we've been doing a lot of work with our SEL program and MTSS
Hmm.
and 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 PBIS and kind of trying to bring them all together. And so we've really started some work on tier two in SEL this year. And so our school actually was featured on the front page of USA Today last week
Wow.
for our work in tier two and using that as like part of our alternative to suspension for students in our age group. So I was really proud of that.
Yeah. So when you
Exciting.
talk about tier two, what does that mean for you, Bridget? Because sometimes that can mean different things for different people. But how are you doing the work here related to that and supporting kids in that way?
Sure. We use our universal screener tool, and that kind of at this age level, it's been a little different. The teachers do that. They rate the kids, but in the fall, they don't know them that well when they do that rating. And so we've also started to look at the tool that comes with our program, where there's an opportunity for kids to do some self-identification. And we're going to implement that part in the fall next year, because what we find is that there are those kids who will fly under the radar. They're real quiet. They don't cause disruptions, but they probably need a little additional support. But initially, when we have those kids who get flagged on that screener, or throughout the year, teachers see that they might need a little extra support, they get called in and we identify them as needing one of several areas of support. Maybe it's regulation, executive functioning, um, relationships, building relationships. So there's five areas. Those are three of the main ones that we mostly see our students needing help with, anxiety, that kind of stuff. And then they have small groups and they meet once or twice a week with our social worker or counselor. And, we talk about different issues. We try to give them tools to meet some of their needs and help them with some of their situations. and do some check-ins with them, and how is that working, and have you been able to use those tools, and we connect with their teachers to see if that's working. And because it's our first year of implementing, what kinds of changes do we need to make for next year?
So with you being there 9 years, Bridget, which makes you an anomaly when you look at the national statistics, right? That what is it? The statistic we share a lot when we're doing training, we're talking about the educator pipeline and the churn that happens in the profession. Only 11% of school leaders are in their buildings 10 or more years is one stat. Another one that I share often is if you hire 4 principals today, into new positions, whether they're rookies or veterans, then only one of those individuals is still going to be in that seat in 5 years. So there's just significant churn. So, you've been in that position for a while, and we'll probably want to talk a little bit about what sustains you in that role in a bit. But you obviously worked pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now post-pandemic in your school. And I'm just kind of curious about, how you've seen the needs of your kids evolve over time. Maybe some of it caused by the pandemic, some of it maybe not, but and maybe most of it is dealing with social emotional types of issues, but just kind of curious about your perspective of how that's impacted and what you've had to do in evolution of the types of supports that you're providing kids, whatever it is, academic, social emotional, whatever that might be.
Yeah, we definitely have seen the needs increase, both socially, emotionally, and academically, because they weren't getting enough socialization, that they were at home. And, parents did the best that they could, but they were working too from home, or they weren't working from home. Maybe they were, an essential worker.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were maybe in like a bubble program, with other families or something like that, but they were not really getting the kind of support they needed. And so there's a lot that we see that the skills that we're used to having them come to us with, they don't have.
By the
So,
time they are in kindergarten, right? But now you're having
well,
to address that second, third grade or something along those lines,
correct. And
right?
we
Yeah.
get them in third grade here. And
Mm-hmm.
so things that we're used to them being able to do, they can't do in
Right.
third grade. So
Mm-hmm.
like we send a note home now, like parents at the end of second grade, please work with your kids over the summer, make sure they can do this, this, and this. And we probably need to add to it, different things, just reminders. But that's one of the changes we're going to make next year in SEL is to we're gonna do that every day instead of just once a week for 30 minutes. We're gonna work on that every day for about 15 minutes and really focus on some specific skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not used to waiting their turn. They want to talk to an adult, even if I'm talking to somebody else, another student or another adult. They're going to just come in and butt in that conversation. Little things like that are social skills that we need to directly teach them.
Yeah. So one of the things is you're talking about, working with the kids that I'm interested in, and this is me probably coming at this as a curious, mostly high school former educator, because that's where I spent my time when I was a teacher and then a principal. But you talked about working with these young kids to help them, identify even their own needs personally. So how do you help work a third grader through something like that? Where awareness maybe more seem to be more set in at like as a high schooler or middle schooler or whatever, but trying to help educate a third grader through some of that. I'm just kind of curious how that works.
It's just really more about questions and language, making sure you're using terms that they can understand. Talking a lot about feelings and trying to identify how would you feel in these situations, certain things like that. And also, we do a lot of PBIS, so making sure that we recognize when they're doing things that we want them to do. And I know that a lot of people struggle with that, but that's just kind of how I think that's how life is. We appreciate being recognized when we've done a good job.
Right. Which often the research says is even as adults, we're not doing enough of that for each other. So
Yeah.
probably more so for kids as well. So, Bridget, you've had this opportunity now to be recognized for your leadership and what you do. One of the things I always like to ask our POIs as we're having these conversations is, what types of quality, what types of dispositions, what types of, competencies and attributes of leadership do you feel like you've leveraged to help you have, some of the success that you've had? And I know that sometimes is a hard thing to ask people to then give yourself a pat on the back per se. I get that, but I do think, we do want to know, like, what are strategies that you've used to help you get the job done?
Well, I know that people talk a lot about collaboration. I think that's really, really key. But you have to really mean it. You cannot go to people and ask for ideas and input and then not use it. Um, and that also then will engender trust. So I think having some trusting support. I will say that one of probably the number one compliment that I get from my teachers is that they know that I have their backs.
Mm,
And I that makes me feel good because I do want them to feel that way. I do support them. I feel like I have an amazing staff. And so I will have their backs all the time. Even when they make a mistake, I'm still there to support them. You
yeah,
know, if we think about it as parents, we're still going to support our kids when they make mistakes. It's the same with teachers and with our students. I that's how I talk to students about their behavior. So that, but it's also, so I would say that it's the trust and support, the collaboration, and then relationships. And I used to really focus on the relationships with the staff, but now it's also like it's the students and the parents, and to me it's just fun. Like I really find myself having a lot of fun.
yeah. How do you find yourself building relationships with parents?
I'm present. They know I care. I make tough phone calls. And sometimes it's hard, but when I kind of remind them, like, let's remember that, you know, ultimately we don't want to. Sometimes parents are like, well, my child would never do that, or,
Yep.
do they really deserve a referral for that? And I say, well, that's not really ultimately important, because in elementary school, these aren't really going anywhere. I look at this as all informational kind of thing, and educational, but we want them to come to us if they're having a hard time. And so if they can't come to us and be honest about their role in a situation, then when it really counts in the future, when they're having to make tough decisions and they're afraid that they're going to be in big trouble
Yeah.
because of a small role that they played in something, then we really run the risk of losing them for something that we could have been a part of.
Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
bet. Well, and engaging with parents early on in those conversations are pretty important. I found too, sometimes it's in the tougher conversations where you have the ability to build deeper relationships than in the superficial.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just had this in the last 2 weeks. I've had at least 10, because we had some big stuff going on. So I've had at least 10 big conversations with parents, and instead of, you know, detentions and taking things away, having that conversation with their child sitting right next to me, even though the child is literally sobbing
Yeah,
and they think it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. I said, listen, your parents love you.
yeah.
That's not going to change based on this.
Hmm.
That is way more powerful than anything else that's going to happen here. And you didn't just get away with anything because you didn't get a referral. You didn't get a lunch detention. We just had a good conversation, and hopefully you don't do that again.
Yeah. Well, and in those moments, it sounds like too, you can help build the relationships between the kids and the parents too,
Right, right.
that they
And
may be able to have
out of
fun
those
conversations.
10 phone calls, only one really was like they were not the parent did not enjoy the call.
Yeah.
So a
Well,
90% success rate, I feel pretty positive about.
those are good. That's a good average. I would
Yeah,
say
for
good
sure.
batting average there. So circling back on the fact that you've been in your current position 9 years, of course, you've been a school leader longer than that. Just kind of curious, Bridget, what sustains you in the job? What keeps you motoring along?
Well, so I started out in a very small district, and this is my third district, all unit districts, and they've gotten, progressively larger, although I'm still not in a very large district. Um, but I'm in a district the size that I do like. Um, but yet it's small enough that I still kind of need to do a lot. Like there's not really room for me to move up here. So as far as that, what sustains me is my actually active involvement in other organizations. So
Yeah.
I've been very involved in IPA in the last few years, in NAESP, and that gives me a professional challenge that I have really appreciated, and it's helped me to grow. And I bring so much back to my own school, and my community, that kind of helps sustain me. Plus, um, I'm an empty nester now, is what I like to say. So I have a little bit more time, and I've been thinking a lot about work-life balance. And I just, I'm grateful I'm in the position I'm in. I work a lot, but I like what I do. So when I hear about that, what I want to say is that everybody has different stages of their life, and I am in a different place than I was when I started as an administrator. When I started, my daughter was like no, let's see, that's a lie. She's 20, and this is my 17th year. So she was 3 when I started. And I could not do the kinds of things and work that I do now. So I am not sacrificing things in my personal life. And that to me is what work-life balance is. If you are missing out on important family things on a regular basis, that's not work-life balance. But I'm not. And I enjoy it. And so I get a lot of satisfaction from that. Um, and I also make sure that I take some time at various times of year or in my life, every couple of years. I like to do theater.
Yeah.
I travel. So I do find time to fit that stuff in. And it really sustains me.
It's interesting. The more and more I've heard people speak to the whole work-life balance, that like we're supposed to put it on a scale and balance it out at like and almost like 50-50 it or whatever. And that's just an impossibility, that the whole management of time and priorities, it just ebbs and flows. And I really like the way that you phrase that up to be, if you really are, at times there's always a sacrifice somewhere. That if you're spending time at home, that sacrifices work. If you're spending time at work, it sacrifices at home. And it's about where are those sacrifices happening. And if you really are sacrificing too much of your family time and expensing that to be able to work or whatever, then there probably needs to be a resetting of time management priorities and everything else. But
Right.
you still got to be able to put food on the table, right? And pay the bills,
Yes.
get the
Yeah.
job done. So it's definitely a constant tension and management of that. So I really appreciate your perspective there. Let's just dig in. You mentioned this is going to sound like a pretty self-serving comment or question, but you mentioned your involvement in IPA and NAESP a little bit. Do you mind just sharing what you've got going on in particular with NAESP right now?
Well, this summer is the United Conference. So it's the joint conference with NASSP and NAESP. And I am actually going to be presenting
Yeah.
with one of my IPA colleagues. So I'm really excited about that. Actually, we just connected today, and we're going to meet next week to, kind of see where we're at with our presentation. So that's exciting. I am finishing up my term on the IPA board. I'm the Zone 5 director, which is Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky.
Hmm.
And then this fall, I will be heading out back to Washington for the Nationally Distinguished Principal Program, as a part of this Principal of the Year award. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And then we'll see where I go from there. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still the treasurer in Kishwaukee region. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'll ever give that up until I retire.
Right, right. Well, and I think as people ask about, where to get involved with organizations, of course, you're on the NAESP board now. You were part of the IPA board prior to that. But this is the way it was for me with IPA. It started at the regional level, and that
Yeah.
is a great place to be. Can you talk a little bit about that experience of being engaged, as a region leader, volunteer, and just as a member generally, what kind of happens at a region and as a part of the board, if people are curious about that at all.
Yeah, it's not as tough as I think a lot of people think it is. We have 4 or 5 meetings a year, and I just find that to be pretty manageable.
Yeah.
Um, and then you can get as involved as you want. And those meetings are valuable. You're getting a lot of information from colleagues on important topics. You're making connections. When I first, I started out life as a high school English teacher. And my first job as principal was a high school principal. And so when I moved into the role of elementary principal, it was my connections in IPA that really helped because there was a lot I didn't know. And so I was able to reach out to people that I knew as elementary
Yeah.
principals, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't have known them otherwise, if I hadn't been in the IPA. So that was really helpful to me. And then it was my choice to get involved at different levels, to start working on different committees and to take on different leadership positions. But I think that just coming to some meetings, because there's usually professional development and you'll have some good topics there. I think that's a great start, to get involved. But it also, I mean, to me, it's the kind, if you're looking to advance in your own career, it's the kind of thing that looks good on your resume. And ultimately education is a small world. So you're going to meet
Yeah.
people that you'll come across, in interviews and different areas like that. So I think it's worth your time.
Well, those collegial networks are important. I think they're important not only just to have people to commiserate with and support one another in this tough job, cry on each other's shoulders when needed or whatever that might be, encourage one another. But then also, the whole adage of it's not what you know, who you know. Well, it is important what you know, but the who you know matters, and that's okay.
Yeah.
People like to look at that sometimes in a negative way, but I don't look at it like that.
I've got a great story about that. So
Yeah.
I was a couple years ago, I needed to hire an art teacher. And I had a Zoom interview with a candidate who was coming from the middle of the state, somewhere in central Illinois. And I think when I finally met her in person, she said to me, she said, "So when you called my principal for a reference," she said, "he said to me, you just got a call from Bridget Belcastro as a reference. She's like famous." And only because during COVID, I had done those elementary IPA, like elementary
Oh,
principal
yeah.
monthly
Yeah.
check-ins,
That's right.
and he had joined in on some of them. And so, we had connected in that way. And I felt like that's wonderful because now he was able to make that connection and tell her, yeah, jump on this job. And she is an amazing staff member in my building. We are
Yeah.
so lucky to have her here.
Yeah. That's
So,
terrific. I love
yeah.
it. I love it. That's great. Well, Bridget, thanks for your time here today. Talk a little bit about your leadership journey and just the good work that you got going on in Johnsburg. Sure appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that, when I was surprised that day in my cafeteria, I don't know how I had the wherewithal to even make this statement, but I did. And I really feel honestly, truly, that this award is a reflection of my staff, my students, and my community, because I could not have been honored in this way if it weren't for all of them and the work that they do and the support that they give to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, sure appreciate that, and congratulations again. It's
Thank you.
outstanding.
All
So again,
right.
my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association, with our Elementary Principal of the Year, Dr. Bridget Belcastro. If there's anything an IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call or check us out on the web at ilprincipals.org. Take care.